So Mary, tell me what you're doing here today.
Well, today what we're doing is I'm preparing this fabric. I'm cutting it into strips. So the concept in working with Restaurant Marc Faglan is to create an uneven plaid pattern that works with fabric and the lattice work that they've constructed on the outside of their restaurant in the cafe. And in my studio right now, I'm interested in uneven plaids and using different dyeing techniques and shaped resist techniques to create plaids on textiles. And when I spoke with Dominique at Marc Faglan, she said their restaurant is really about very natural, organic, kind of dreamscape imagery in their menu and in the food that they create. So in creating a woven texture on the outside of their cafe, I felt that it was kind of a mesh between what's happening with food, where it's very creative and an intermingling of flavors and textures and resources, and the weaving is also kind of meshing the idea of dreamscapes and very natural, organic movement in the textile as it relates to the wood lattice structure.
How was the wood lattice? What challenges did that present?
Well, I think one of the challenges is it's been shellacked, so I don't know what color is going to come off when it rains. And as this, the textile is woven in, I don't know what's going to kind of rub off onto the fabric. And so in making the decision to work mainly with black, it's a black polycotton, that if color does come out or if it rains and the fabric gets a little damaged, it's not going to be so disconcerting. It's not going to look unattractive. It's just going to be part of a natural decaying process or deconstruction process. But I think the interesting thing about the lattice is it has a very textile feel. I mean, it feels like an outdoor garden. And so I think it's going to be interesting the way that it relates not only to my work in the studio, but I'm hoping that this is also going to inspire me to do things on a larger scale than on just that very intimate apparel accessory scale.
Is this the biggest area that you've had to work on?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it's about 56 running feet of lattice, 56 by 4 feet high. So when I do things, it's not necessarily the scale that I work on more, certainly yardage pieces that have been this long, but not in a configuration, where it's wrapping a building. So that's a really good question. I think this is probably one of the larger pieces that I've looked at.
How did you find out about this project and what attracted you to it?
I received an email one morning from Pamela Fredericks from Tribeca Citizen. So I read that and I thought, oh, this sounds kind of interesting. So I actually forwarded the email to a bunch of my friends. And then I wrote back to Pam and I said, oh, I forwarded it to a bunch of friends. And she's like, well, really, why don't you think about doing it? And I was like, oh, okay, I'll think about it. And then when I spoke with you on the phone, I thought it was really intriguing to be able to, number one, do something outside in this scale that was kind of an organic outgrowth here in Tribeca. I mean, I love this community. I've lived here for a long time. My daughter went to elementary school at 234 and now she's taking a gap year before college. So I really wanted to be part of the community and part of the neighborhood. And I think I actually was really excited to work with this restaurant, Marc Faglan. I hope I say that correctly. Forgian. Because of his concept of food and what he's, doing for the neighborhood. And I just wanted to give back something because I really think it's been so hard not only for artists, but also for restaurants. I think we're all kind of learning how to experience a new normal, and by teaming together, I'm hoping everybody can come out a little bit stronger. And besides that, right now it is so beautiful outside. Who wouldn't want to be outside working instead of in a studio?
Tell me who's working with you here today.
Sure. The woman with her hair up with the green shibori shirt on is Edith Lieben, and she's my daughter. And Vicky Kuzami is a mural artist, and Vicky and I have been friends since the 80s when we were both living in Japan. So Vicky came and stayed with me for a while when she was doing some murals in Yokohama, and I was living in Tokyo at the time. So, and Vicky actually is the one that pulled me back to New York City in 1996. She called me up and said, will you come and help me do a mural for the Tibetan New Year at Carnegie Hall? And I was like, well, I don't know. And then I was like, okay, sure. So that really brought me back to New York. So actually, this is payback.
Yeah, I know. I hear
This
that.
is payback.
Right.
For the times that I've helped Vicky with different murals.
So lastly, what do you want the reaction to passersby as they're walking across the street or driving down the street? What do you want them? What do you want to elicit from them?
You know, that's a really good question, and I have thought about that a lot. What I hope when people walk by is that they kind of see this very ribbon-like, natural, organic weaving that relates to the restaurant because it's black, and then we're using this green fabric with the colors that go from soft chartreuses to, you know, these very deep teal forest greens, which relate, I think, very nicely to the bees that are in the lavender today, and this really natural kind of foraging that you feel when you're just sitting here working. So I hope people, number one, are going to relate to the texture, that it's soft, that it's woven, that it's something that everybody has in their life every day. It's a textile, and that it's also that experimental nature that you can create something kind of spontaneously with just by talking things out with somebody. So it was a bit of a process to come up with this idea of weaving, because I had some other ideas that I was really excited about, and then when I discussed it with Dominique and told her about the weaving idea, that was the one that she really gravitated to. So it was actually not my first concept for decorating the restaurant. My first concept was working with upcycled napkins. So to take materials that they had used in their restaurant that maybe were a little bit worn and not quite as attractive as when they were brand new, and to take those napkins and do some shibori plaid dye work on them, and then attach them also in kind of an uneven patchwork plaid fashion to the facade of the lattice. But when I spoke with Dominique, she said, well, you know, she liked that idea, but she thought the idea of integrating the textile, especially a black textile with some hits of green, was something that was more in tune to the whole concept of the restaurant and the food that's created here.
Great.